I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that the ground beneath your feet right now doesn't just support your weight.
Right.
Imagine that it actually remembers you. Like every single footstep you've ever taken, every breath you've exhaled, every time you've, laughed or bled or cried.
It's a heavy concept to just drop on someone, but yeah.
It is. But imagine a world where the planet itself acts as this like massive living sponge for your entire existence. Nothing you do, not a single fleeting emotion, is ever truly lost.
Because it forces a complete psychological rewrite of how you exist in a physical space.
Exactly.
Like the whole concept of a private moment or just some fleeting, inconsequential action, it's completely eradicated. You are leaving a permanent, indelible imprint on the ecosystem with literally every passing second. You aren't just walking on a world, you're continuously downloading yourself into it.
Yeah. That is the terrifying and honestly the beautiful reality of Yaenddarr. We are diving back into the planetary archives today, and look, since you all know the overarching cosmic origins of this world, we aren't going to waste time rehashing the dawn of the eons or, basic geography.
Yeah, we can skip the standard history lesson this time.
Right. We are zeroing in on a very specific, incredibly profound mechanic hidden deep within the latest stack of world-building documents, the lore wikis and character chronicles we've been poring over. We are decoding the ecological and spiritual mechanics of death, rebirth, and the afterlife on Yaenddarr.
And looking at the sheer volume of material we have on this, from the ancient timeline logs right down to the margins of personal journals, it's so clear that mortality on Yaenddarr is not an endpoint.
Not at all.
It's an engine. It's a mechanism for biological and spiritual transformation. But the rules of that transformation are hyper-dependent on where you die, who you are, and honestly what the planet decides it needs from your memory.
Which is wild. And quick side note for you before we get too deep in the weeds. We combed the archives top to bottom looking for any mention of the term dully.
Oh yeah, nothing.
Literally nothing. Total dead end in the source text. So since we found absolutely no mention of dully, we are going to focus all our energy entirely on what actually is there.
Which is more than enough material, trust me.
Seriously, we're focusing purely on the intricate, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying cycles of mortality on this planet. Because if we are talking about death on Yaenddarr, we aren't actually talking about a cessation of life. We are talking about data transfer.
Yes, data transfer. And to understand that data transfer, we have to start with the medium itself, like the substance that makes this entire cycle possible. We need to talk about the physical manifestation of the planet's memory.
Which brings us to Elixir.
Exactly, Elixir, the iridescent liquid that is completely unique to the Elysium forest.
Yeah.
And looking at the tectonic records in the lore, Elixir wasn't something that just naturally pooled over millions of years.
No, it was violent.
Right, it was born from a planetary trauma.
The texts describe this massive quake, a moment when Yaenddar's literal continental spine just cracked open. The ground parted in the 4 cardinal directions, and from those deep glowing crevices, Elixir didn't just flow out, it spewed.
The imagery in the text for that eruption is it's wild. It describes the liquid rising like the, quote, sap of forgotten stars.
Which is such a cool visual.
It really is. It's highly viscous, moving with this strange, slow deliberation, and it radiates in 5 shifting colors that have absolutely no sustained pattern. They're just constantly in flux. But what I really want to dig into is the chemical, or I guess alchemical makeup of this stuff.
Yeah, break that down.
The lore states it is a combination of fey essence and lunar water.
And the mechanics of that specific combination are exactly what make Elixir function as a memory bank.
How so?
Well, the fey essence is basically the grounding wire. It's pure, localized terrestrial magic that's deeply imbued with the root systems and the physical biology of the planet. It's the tether, right?
Right, yeah. The lunar water, on the other hand, is celestial. It's influenced by the gravitational and temporal pull of the moon. So when you bind terrestrial biology with celestial timekeeping, you get a substance that can actually trap and preserve chronological experiences. It doesn't just hold magic, it holds time.
I was reading through the chronicles trying to map this to something we can easily grasp, and I keep coming back to this computing analogy.
Let's hear it.
If we accept the lore's premise that Yaenddarr is a sentient, reactive organism like a living planet, then the physical terrain is basically a massive organic computer.
Right.
The dirt, the bedrock, the deep root networks, that's your hard drive. That's where the long-term, static, fossilized data of planetary history is stored.
But Elixir Elixir is the RAM.
I see the parallel, but we do have to be a little careful with that analogy.
Aye.
Well, RAM is volatile. When you cut the power on a computer, the RAM wipes itself clean. Elixir is the exact opposite of volatile. It's cumulative. It never wipes.
Oh, good point. But you are absolutely right about its function as active memory. That's the key. It keeps the data fluid and immediately accessible to the ecosystem.
Yes, exactly. It's the accessibility that matters here. When a creature bleeds out on the forest floor, their history, their trauma, the literal electrical impulses of their dying brain, they aren't just locked away in the sedimentary rock, they are absorbed into the elixir.
They enter the stream.
Right. And the text explicitly notes that the liquid, it sings in sensory vibrations. The memory stays active, just buzzing on the surface layer of the ecosystem, basically capable of being queried.
The word queried is perfect for this, because Elixir interacts with the living based on resonance.
Right, like that story with Umok.
Exactly. There is this meticulously detailed account of the Florian elder, Umok, discovering Elixir shortly after that massive planetary fracture.
Yeah.
He approaches one of these glowing fissures, kneels down, and a single drop of the liquid just lifts from the pool.
Just on its own.
Totally on its own. It defies gravity, hovering right in front of his palm. The text actually states it was drawn not by gravity, but by memory.
That specific line stopped me in my tracks when I read it, because it implies that the liquid recognized him. Or, I guess more accurately, it recognized the genetic and spiritual history he carried in his cells.
Yeah, it recognized a matching frequency. And when the drop finally lands on Umok's hand, it doesn't burn him. Instead, it strikes a chord across his veins.
Wow.
The text describes it lighting up his memory, his instincts, giving him this profound sense of origin. It vibrates. But if we take a step back and look at the broader societal implications of this.
It's a lot.
It really is. How do you build a civilization around a water source that is literally saturated with the consciousness of your ancestors?
It sounds like an absolute sensory nightmare, to be honest. I mean, imagine going down to a local stream to fill your canteen, and as the water touches your lips, you were suddenly just overwhelmed by the sensory vibration of a territorial dispute from 3 centuries ago.
Or just intense grief.
Right, like the raw grief of a mother who wept into that same river a decade prior. You couldn't just drink it casually. You'd literally be consuming ghosts.
Which forces transparency on a fundamental biological level. You could not conceal your history on Yaenddarr because the environment itself would sing your secrets back to anyone who walked past the same pond.
That is so intense.
It dissolves the boundary between the individual psyche and the collective environment. You aren't just a person moving through a forest anymore. You are a localized node of the forest's larger consciousness.
Which naturally brings us to the most pressing question in all of this. If Elixir is this massive fluid database of every single soul that has ever passed through the ecosystem, how do you get a specific soul out?
Right, because people still die.
Exactly. People still fall in battle on Yaenddarr. They get hunted by predators. Death definitely happens. But if their consciousness is dissolved into the singing water, who acts as the IT department to pull them back out?
That responsibility falls to the merfolk. And their role in this is highly, highly specialized. To understand it, we have to look at the city of Suralis.
The underwater city.
Yeah, it's located deep beneath the surface, constructed from these spirals of shimmering coral and what the lore calls starlight-strung current waves. Suralis is the location of the rebirthing pools, which they call Lumareach.
And the ritual they perform there is called soul restoration. But I want to be really clear with you all about how this works because it completely subverts standard fantasy necromancy.
It really does.
They do not use spells. There are no pentagrams, no blood sacrifices, no force being applied whatsoever. They don't drag the dead back from the void. They sing.
Yeah, they utilize what the texts call glyph tones. These tones are described as pure ancient harmonies. They are curling acoustic vibrations that are designed to weave mind and body back into a state of wholeness.
It's beautiful, honestly.
It is. The merfolk gather around the central basin of Lumareach, where the water is thick with loss and stored memory. And through their specific overlapping vocal frequencies, a golden shimmer begins to gather on the pond's surface.
So they're physically altering the water with sound.
Exactly. They're essentially vibrating the elixir at the exact frequency of the deceased individual, causing their dispersed memories to coagulate back into a single consciousness.
There's a quote from a merfolk character named Salen that defines this entire philosophy so perfectly. Salen is whispering from the current, and she says, quote, "We don't command souls to return. We remind them they are welcome to."
The emphasis on agency there is just staggering.
It really is.
The soul is not being summoned against its will, right? It is being invited. But the mechanics of how the soul is actually reconstructed, that is where the lore gets incredibly dense.
Yeah, because the soul isn't just pulled out intact like a fish on a hook. It is stitched together from the fragmented environmental memories stored in the elixir.
Exactly. And the text lists these fragments explicitly. It says it's a name remembered by an ancient oak tree, a laugh that echoed and was trapped in the whispering glade, or a specific pattern of breath once shared with a partner.
Okay, I have to stop here because we need to debate the philosophical reality of this. I was wrestling with this for hours last night.
Uh-oh. Lay it on me.
If you die, right, and your soul completely dissolves into the water, and then the merfolk sing you back, but they are rebuilding you using the memories that a tree or a river or a glade kept of you. Are you actually still you?
Oh, man.
Or are you just a localized collage of how the world perceived you?
You're hitting on the classic ship of Theseus paradox, but applied to consciousness.
Exactly.
If every plank of the ship is replaced, is it the same ship? If every memory used to rebuild your soul is sourced from external observations rather than your internal monologue, are you the same person?
Because how a tree remembers you is definitely not how you experience yourself. Like, a tree might remember you leaning against it and crying. The whispering glade might remember you laughing. But neither of those environments knows your internal fears or your childhood secrets or, the lie you told your friend yesterday. If you are reconstituted entirely from external environmental data points, the you that comes out of that pool is basically an edited version. You are a highly curated playlist of your own life, selected by the planet.
The lore actually confronts this directly. It doesn't shy away from the imperfection of the restoration at all.
What does it say?
The texts state that when the spirit finally takes solid shape and steps out of Lumerich, quote, they were not exactly who they had been, but neither were they someone else. They were restored, not rewound.
Restored, not rewound. That phrasing is doing so much heavy lifting.
It really is.
Because it acknowledges that the process of dying, being dissolved into the planetary ram, and being acoustically stitched back together changes you fundamentally. The edges might be softer. A grudge you are holding internally might not have registered in the environment, so when you are rebuilt, that grudge simply doesn't exist anymore.
Right, the data was lost.
Yeah. It's not a perfect undo button. It's like a version 2.0 update based on whatever backup data was available.
And what's really fascinating is how the inhabitants of Yaenddarr accept this. There is no existential dread surrounding that slight loss of self.
None at all.
There's this great detail about a Florian character named Telly, who is a known prankster in his community. He's standing by the rebirthing pool, watching the surface, and he whispers to his sketch leaf, "If I fall one day, I hope the water sings me back with better jokes."
That completely recontextualizes their fear of death. For Telly, death isn't oblivion, It's just a chance for a software patch.
Yeah, a literal upgrade.
Seralis isn't just an underwater city. The text says it pulses softly as a second chance for everyone. But we should note, this entire merfolk process requires intention.
Highly deliberate intention.
Right. It requires a community gathering to sing for you. It requires peace, time, and deliberate magical intervention.
Which is a stark contrast to the biological reality of the forest above them.
Oh, yeah. Completely different.
Because while the merfolk offer this serene spiritual rebirth, Yaenddarr also possesses a deeply chaotic, purely biological form of rebirth. One that is triggered not by a gentle song, but by violent physical trauma.
Right, and to understand that, we have to look closely at the Florians themselves. We've mentioned Umak and Telly, but let's actually break down their biology for you guys.
They are fascinating.
They are humanoid plant beings native to the Elysium forest. We're talking bark-like skin, foliage, wood-dense limbs. Culturally, they lean heavily toward pacifism and spiritual contemplation. But biologically, they are highly regenerative.
The key to their regeneration is their spore system. When a Florian is injured, they don't just bleed, right? They release spores.
And on a surface level, you might assume this is just a clotting mechanism or some localized defense tactic.
Which would make sense.
But it is actually the foundation of how their entire species continues. To understand the extreme end of this, we have to look at the primary historical example involving Elder Umar.
Let me walk you through the sensory details of this event, because it is wild.
Please do.
So, Umak is in the fairy realms, participating in this high-stakes sparring match. It's physical, it's fast, and he makes a critical error. His opponent's blade comes down and completely severs Umak's arm. It hits the forest floor.
In any standard fantasy setting, this is a horrific maiming. We expect screaming, tourniquets, a desperate rush to a healer.
Exactly. But the biological mechanics of a Florian in crisis operate on a completely different axis. The severed arm on the ground doesn't just die. It immediately reacts to the trauma of separation.
It tries to survive.
Yes. As Umok's stump is bleeding, this massive, dense cloud of luminescent spores erupts from the open wound. These spores swirl in the air and aggressively seek out the severed limb. They settle over the arm, binding it with the elixir-rich soil of the forest floor.
And the timeline here is what's really staggering.
It's so fast.
Within hours, the flesh and bark of the severed arm literally dissolve and restructure into a tiny sapling.
It aggressively roots itself. The leaves unfurl, drawing ambient magic and nutrients at hyperspeed. Over the course of a remarkably short period, that sapling grows into a fully sentient young Florian.
It's insane. Umok literally grows a daughter from his severed arm. He names her Alara.
Let's break down the implications of this, because it completely obliterates our human understanding of lineage, reproduction, and mortality.
Completely.
Alara is not a child born from a union of two parents. She's not a clone either, because she possesses her own distinct consciousness. She is a biological byproduct of sudden, violent trauma.
And Umok addresses this directly when he speaks to the Florian Council later. He states, quote, "She's not my legacy, she is my continuation."
The distinction between legacy and continuation is huge.
Massive, because legacy implies you leave something behind after you are gone. Continuation implies you are still happening.
Right.
I was trying to map this to something familiar, and I thought about propagating houseplants.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. If you have a succulent and you break a leaf off, you can let it callus over, stick it in a pot of dirt, and it will grow a completely new root system. It becomes a new plant. But imagine if that succulent leaf you broke off inherited a fractured portion of your consciousness.
Oh, man.
Imagine if it remembered the pain of the knife that cut it.
That is exactly where the succulent analogy gets dark. And it's highly accurate to the lore. Alara isn't a blank slate. She inherits the biological echo of the trauma that created her. Her very existence is predicated on her father's severe injury.
Which is a heavy burden.
Definitely. For a human, losing a limb is a permanent deficit.
Mm.
It is a reduction of the physical self. For a Florian, losing a limb is a violently sudden investment in the population. It is an aggressive, involuntary form of giving life.
Which completely reframes their cultural pacifism.
Doesn't it?
It really does. The lore always paints the Florians as these peaceful, meditative forest guardians. We usually assume fantasy races are pacifists because they view life as sacred or, they have a philosophical aversion to violence. But what if the Florians are pacifist because their biology turns every single battlefield into a nursery?
It's an issue of ecological scale. If a Florian army went to war and thousands of them were slashed, maimed, and dismembered, the result wouldn't just be a field of corpses.
No, it would be an explosion.
It would be an uncontrollable population boom of thousands of new Florians, all born simultaneously from severed limbs, all carrying the inherited biological trauma of a battlefield. It would overwhelm the ecosystem instantly.
So they avoid war not because they are afraid to die, but because they are terrified of hyper-reproducing through agony.
Exactly. It is a chilling biological imperative. It's essentially an arms control mechanism built directly into their DNA.
But the tragedy of Yaenddarr is that while the Florians suppress their own violent rebirth, there is another species on this planet that weaponizes it.
Oh, the Pharaoh.
Yeah. If the Florians are the embodiment of passive vegetative continuation, we have to look at the dark mirror of that process. What happens when rebirth is fueled exclusively by unadulterated predatory rage?
To see that, we have to shift our focus away from the luminous Elysium forest and look at the wilding field.
Set the scene for us.
This is a massive, barren expanse covered in thick ash, defined by hostile terrain and brutal survival mechanics. It is the territory of the Pharaoh.
And the Pharaoh are the apex predators of Yaenddarr. They are aggressive, shape-shifting entities with the seemingly insatiable bloodlust. But it's not their teeth and claws that make them terrifying.
No, not at all.
What makes them an existential threat to the rest of the planet is their relationship with the Elixir Lakes. Because when a Pharaoh dies, it does not go to a rebirthing pool to be gently sung back by merfolk. And it doesn't leave behind spores to grow a new generation.
When a Pharaoh is killed, its consciousness is immediately pulled into the boiling Elixir Lakes of the wilding field. But unlike the clear, memory-preserving waters of Loomreach, the Elixir here acts as a hyper-accelerated evolutionary forge.
It's a crucible.
Exactly. The Pharaoh respawns, but its body adapts to the specific cause of its previous death.
They are literally trapped in a biological death loop. If a Phara is burned to death by a spellcaster, it respawns from the boiling lake with fire-resistant charred bark armor.
Right.
If it is crushed by a boulder, it respawns with reinforced hyperdense bone plating. And furthermore, their shape-shifting allows them to mimic the traits of anything they manage to kill and consume before they die.
They steal biology.
Yes, they might incorporate a Glalian's sprinting musculature or a thorn beast's impaling spikes. For a Phara, death is not a failure state. It is a tactical upgrade.
You really have to look at the strategic nightmare this presents.
It's unwinnable.
It is. How do you mount a defense against an invading force that uses its own casualties as a training montage? If you find a weakness in their armor and exploit it, you have effectively patched that weakness for their next iteration.
So violence against the Phara is strategically obsolete. Every time you kill them, you are just sharpening the blade that will eventually cut you down.
It is the ultimate unbreakable arms race. The Florians are forced to defend their borders, but every time they repel a Phara incursion, the next wave is mathematically harder to kill. And this endless grinding cycle of violence, death, and immediate violent rebirth eventually breaks the planetary system.
Because we established earlier that Elixir absorbs memory.
Right, it's the RAM.
It is a cumulative data bank. So for months, perhaps years, the boiling lakes of the wildling field are absorbing the fragmented trauma, the agony of violent death, the betrayal, and the furious bloodlust of countless dying Pharas.
The sheer volume of negative emotional data reaches a critical mass.
It's too much for the system.
Exactly. The Elixir suffers the magical equivalent of a buffer overflow, and it vomits out an anomaly.
The entity known as the Fury.
Yes. The theory is not just a single mutated Phara. The texts describe it as an embodied, towering specter of collective rage.
It's literally trauma given physical form.
It is a physical manifestation of the environment's saturated memory. It is the combined subconscious of thousands of agonizing death loops given form, dragging vaporous chains constructed from failed transformations and discarded, ruined bodies.
And the tactical advantage of the Fury is what makes it unstoppable. Because it is comprised of the memories of every Phara that ever died fighting the Florians, it possesses a perfect encyclopedic knowledge of every defensive tactic the Florians have ever used.
It already knows how to beat you before you even swing.
Exactly. The lore details the Florian sentinels attempting to confront it at the border. The Fury preemptively countered them before they could even strike. Blade formations dissolved because the Fury already knew the weak point in the phalanx.
It's just unfair at that point.
Totally. Spellcasters were silenced before they could finish their chants because the Fury remembered the exact timing of the somatic components and disrupted them. It was perfectly immune to combat.
So the Sentinels are faced with an impossible equation. They cannot defeat it with force because force created it. They cannot outmaneuver it because it remembers all their maneuvers. How do you stop a manifestation of pure, iterative violence?
You stop fighting.
You stop fighting.
The Florian Sentinels did the unthinkable. They stood their ground, they dropped their weapons, and they let the Fury slaughter them.
It is crucial to examine the precise wording in the lore here, though. The text specifically states, quote, "not in surrender, in sacrifice."
That distinction is huge.
It is. Surrender implies defeat. Sacrifice implies a deliberate tactical exchange. By standing down and allowing themselves to be killed in a state of absolute meditative peace, the Florians injected their pacifist essence directly into the system.
Their blood and spores mixed with the earth. Their souls hit the planetary ram. And because the Fury was inextricably linked to the Elixir, constantly dying, respawning, and drawing from the lake's memory bank, it was suddenly forced to ingest the data of the fallen Florians.
Which acts as a massive disruptor. The Elixir doesn't just recycle physical destruction. It acts as an emotional filter.
Right.
As the Fury continued to cycle through its existence, drawing on the lake, it was no longer just pulling up files of rage and trauma. It was suddenly hitting blocks of pure empathy, of radical acceptance, of peaceful sacrifice. The Florians forcibly altered the pH balance of the planet's memory.
I was trying to find a psychological equivalent for this, and it maps perfectly to the treatment of severe phobias or generational trauma.
Like exposure therapy.
Exactly. The Phara were essentially trapped in a planetary panic attack. They were acting out of inherited rage, dying in terror, and passing that panic to their next iteration. You cannot punch someone out of a panic attack.
That just makes it worse.
The Florians realized that the only way to break the loop was to introduce a grounding agent. By sacrificing themselves, They force the biological software of the Pharaoh to reboot with a massive patch of empathy.
And the lore confirms this methodology worked. After countless cycles, filtering through the altered elixir, the entity emerged from the boiling lake, fundamentally changed. It was no longer a specter of endless violence. It emerged as what the texts call a cleared one.
A cleared one.
It retained its massive size, it bore the terrible scars of its evolution, but it walked with slow intention. The Chronicle uses this deeply evocative phrase to describe it. It calls it rage that learned to breathe.
Rage that learned to breathe. It's such a profound resolution. And this event completely altered the geopolitical and ecological structure of Yaenddarr. It led to the drafting of the Florian Accord. The Florians completely abandoned their military defenses at the borders of the wildling field.
They realized that the Pharaoh incursions were not fundamentally about conquering territory. The Pharaoh were instinctively throwing themselves against the Florian defenses because the trauma of combat was the only catalyst they knew for transformation.
They needed it to grow.
Right. They were returning to the borders to find themselves, using violence as the only available tool for self-actualization.
So, if violence is just a tool for transformation, the Florians decided to provide a better tool. They built the return passage constructs.
These are incredible.
They really are. They are described as peaceful, rune-lined corridors of bark light. They are essentially designated safe highways designed to guide the Pharaoh directly through the forest and into the wildling field, completely bypassing any populated areas or defensive lines.
It is literal ecological exposure therapy. They remove the friction entirely.
Yep.
The Pharaoh are allowed to travel to the wildling field to undergo a ritual the lore calls ash-stilled resonance. Within this safe space, the Pharaoh voluntarily lay down their mimic skins. They don't have to be killed to shed their past forms.
You just let it go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The elixir pulses within them not as a burning weapon of rapid evolution, but as a soothing reclamation of their true form, allowing them to finally ascend from the death loop.
Look at the sheer scale of the moral architecture we've uncovered here today. I mean, we started with merfolk gently coaxing souls out of the water with songs. We moved to Florians violently propagating from severed limbs, and ended with apex predators achieving enlightenment through exposure therapy.
It's an incredibly cohesive system.
It is. But in every single instance, the underlying rule is exactly the same. Yaenddarr rewards those who let go of their trauma. True ascension on this planet is achieved only when you stop fighting the cycle and start allowing the planet to process your memory.
It is a brilliantly cohesive system of ecological grace. But, as with any complex system, there are edge cases.
Oh, we love the edge cases.
We have to talk about them. There are entities and events that completely bypass the established rules of elixir, spores, and rebirthing pools. We need to examine the anomalies, the instances where death is hijacked by cosmic destiny or parasitic evolution or raw alchemical transmutation.
Let's start with the most cosmic outlier of them all, Lycaios. If you are familiar with the broader universe, you know Lycaios is a celestial being. He is the son of the primordial Aeon Celestria.
He's practically a god.
Basically. He essentially crash lands on Yaenddarr, so he is an alien biology operating within a closed-loop planetary system. And the lore details the specific timeline event where Lycaios is engaged in brutal combat with a creature called a dire cat, and Lycaios actually dies.
His heart fully stops. The physical vessel fails. But his soul does not enter the elixir.
It doesn't dissolve.
No, he is not absorbed by the planetary ram.
Hmm.
For Lycaios, death acts as a temporary cosmic jurisdictional dispute. Because he is a being composed of primordial lunar energy, his soul operates on a frequency that Yaenddarr's terrestrial magic simply cannot parse.
It's incompatible software.
Exactly. He is pulled entirely out of the physical realm and into a celestial waiting room, a space between stars.
It's literally a VIP lobby for the afterlife. While his body is lying dead in the dirt, his consciousness is having a face-to-face conversation with his mother, Celestria.
Just a casual chat while he's dead.
Yeah. She explains the nature of the planet to him, delivers this profound monologue about his destiny, and then, without any merfolk singing or spore regeneration, his soul is simply slammed back into his physical body. He revives, gasps for air, and finishes the fight.
It highlights a crucial limitation of Yaenddar's system. The planet can only process and remember what actually belongs to it.
Right, Lycaios is external data.
Yes. The plan rejects his soul, bouncing it back to its point of origin, which allows his divine lineage to essentially reboot his physical form. But if Lycaios represents death circumvented by divine privilege, the creature he was fighting represents death circumvented by sheer parasitic willpower.
Scar the dire cat.
Oh, Scar.
Scar's story is probably the most visceral, gritty example of biological refusal in the entire lore. During this conflict, Scar gets picked up by a giant rock, which is this massive legendary bird of prey. The rock flies Scar high above the desolate peaks of the mountain range and drops him.
Just lets him fall.
Yeah, Scar plummets, crashes into the rocks, and every bone in his body shatters. He is on the absolute precipice of death, bleeding out in the high altitudes.
But the location of his fall is the catalyst. He doesn't just land on bare stone, he lands inside the massive nest of the rock.
Talk about luck.
And right next to his broken, dying body are two hatching rock chicks. Now, standard biological mechanics dictate that Scar should die there, and his memories would slowly trickle down the mountain into the water table. But Scar refuses the cycle.
He refuses to become a memory. He gives in to pure, unadulterated, beastly hunger. With the shattered jaw and broken limbs, he drags himself over and consumes the rock chicks. And the lore is very specific about the mechanics of what happens next. It's not just about the calories.
No, it's way darker.
He uses the pulse of stolen life to trigger a forced, violent biological rebirth.
It's parasitic transmutation. The raw, nascent life force of the chicks acts as a jumpstart battery for his failing cellular structure.
Yes.
His muscles rapidly swell, snapping his broken bones back into alignment and reinforcing them. His overall mass doubles in size.
He just brute forces his own healing.
He really does. He transforms from a standard dire cat into a massive, mutated super predator. He bypassed the rebirthing pools entirely by stealing the biological capital of another species to rewrite his own failing code.
It's a brutal reminder that while Yaenddarr has these beautiful, graceful systems of memory and peace, the raw mechanics of predatory nature can still just completely subvert the rules. Scar didn't want to be remembered by the planet. He wanted to keep living on it.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most complex anomaly we found, the Shadows.
The Shadows are so weird.
They are fundamentally different from Florian's, Farah, or dire cats. They originate in the savage jungle, and they are immortal beings composed of pure dark energy and insatiable hunger.
Just living voids.
Basically, they are physical manifestations of the void. You cannot kill a shadow by conventional means. If you cut it, there's no biology to bleed. If you burn it, the fire simply passes right through the dark mass.
So how do you enforce mortality on a creature that is made of immortal nothingness?
You don't try to destroy the energy, you flip its polarity.
Yes, and this is where Alara comes back into the story. Alara, the daughter grown from Umok's severed arm, she discovers that she possesses a unique, latent mutation, what the lore calls solar star potential. She can channel raw solar magic.
When Alara encounters a shadow, she doesn't try to inflict physical trauma. She uses a technique called solar purification. And we need to look closely at the thermodynamics of this magic.
Okay, let's break it down.
She isn't hitting the shadow with a blast of heat to incinerate it. She is flooding the creature's dark mass with hyper-concentrated solar frequencies.
It's spiritual alchemy. The lore describes the dark energy reacting violently to the solar influx, but it doesn't dissipate. Instead, the fundamental nature of the shadow is inverted. The endless, consuming hunger of the void is alchemically transmuted into boundless, radiant output.
It's an incredible flip.
The creature collapses in on itself and is rebirthed instantly as a solar fae.
The death of the shadow is not the cessation of its existence. It is a total realignment of its elemental physics. It goes from being a localized black hole that consumes ambient magic to a small, harmless star that produces ambient energy. It completely rewrites the entity's relationship with the universe.
It's amazing when you lay all of these out side by side, like Hyas bouncing off the cosmic waiting room, Scar hijacking his own biology with stolen life force, the Shadows being alchemically flicked from dark to light, the Farah evolving through a crucible of rage, the Florians aggressively sprouting from trauma, and the merfolk singing souls out of the memory water. It paints an unbelievable picture of this universe.
It really does.
Death is never just a game over screen on Yaenddarr.
No. That is the definitive thesis of Yaenddarr. It is a world where existence is stubbornly, almost aggressively persistent. The planet itself acts as this vast, infallible safety net of memory and biology, ensuring that nothing is ever truly erased. The energy, the memories, the physical mass, it is constantly being recycled, remembered, and restored through a dozen different, highly specialized filters.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, traversing from the bioluminescent depths of Ceralis to the ash-choked plains of the wildling field, and all the way up to the cosmic waiting rooms between the stars.
We really went everywhere.
We did. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to pull us all the way back to the very first thought experiment I posed to you at the beginning. I asked you to imagine a world where the ground remembers every step you take and every tear you shed.
It remains one of the most hauntingly beautiful concepts we've explored in all these archives.
It is, but now that we understand the mechanics, now that we know how the elixir actually stores your data and how your body can be rebuilt, rewritten, or completely evolved by the environment after you fall, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on.
Go for it.
If you live on Yaenddarr and you are continually reborn, if you walk out of the Luma Reach pools carrying the echoes of your past lives, patched together by the memories of the trees and the rivers, at what point do you stop being a single, isolated individual moving through a forest and start becoming the forest itself?